One second, you feel safe. And then,
The police are on their way.
well, you still do.
The first sign my marriage was dying came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, when I caught my wife Julia whispering into her phone in our walk-in closet like some teenage girl hiding from her parents. "I can't talk now," she breathed into the device, her back pressed against my expensive suits. "Alex is right outside." Alex, that's me, was indeed right outside, standing in our bedroom doorway in nothing but boxer shorts, wondering why my wife of 12 years was having secret conversations in the dark. The hardwood floor creaked under my bare feet as I stepped closer. "Julia?" I called softly. The phone snapped shut faster than a Venus flytrap. She emerged from the closet with that smile I'd fallen in love with back in college, the one that used to make my heart skip but now just made my stomach clench. "Hey, honey. Just checking my mom's flight details. You know how she worries about early departures." Her mother lived in Phoenix. It was 12:47 a.m. there, but I nodded and climbed back into bed, filing away another lie in the growing collection I'd been accumulating. "My name is Alex Carter, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out." At 38, I ran a successful IT consulting firm, owned a 4-bedroom colonial in Westfield's most desirable neighborhood, and had a son, Max, who actually still talked to me despite being 15. Julia managed social media for 3 local businesses and spent most of her time curating our perfect family image on Instagram. The house that Instagram built, that's what I called our place. Every corner designed for optimal photo opportunities, every meal plated like we had our own personal food stylist. Julia's followers ate it up. #blessed-life, #married to my best friend, #family goals. If only they knew about the 2 a.m. closet conversations. The next morning, Julia was back to her usual self, flitting around our granite-countered kitchen in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, making her signature avocado toast while live-streaming to her followers. "Good morning, beautiful people," she chirped at her phone. "Starting another blessed day with my gorgeous family. Alex is off to save the digital world, and Max has that big geometry test today." She panned the camera to where I sat reading the news on my tablet, coffee growing cold in my favorite mug, a Father's Day gift from Max that read, "World's okayest dad." "Say hi to everyone, honey." I waved without looking up. After 12 years of marriage, I'd learned that Julia's social media performances required minimal participation from the supporting cast. "And there's my handsome husband, everyone. Isn't he just the best?" The comments started rolling in immediately. Julia's followers were a devoted bunch of suburban wives who lived vicariously through her carefully curated content. "You two are relationship goals. Alex is such a catch. When is Julia going to teach us her secrets?" If they only knew the secret was having separate bedrooms for the past 3 months. Max wandered into the kitchen, earbuds in, backpack slung over one shoulder. At 15, he'd inherited my height and Julia's sharp cheekbones, but thankfully my skeptical nature when it came to his mother's dramatics. "Morning, Dad." He grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl, the one Julia arranged fresh every morning for maximum visual appeal. "Mom, you're blocking the door." "Just finishing up, sweetheart. Everyone say goodbye to Max. Isn't he getting so tall?" Max rolled his eyes and escaped through the garage door. Smart kid. Julia ended her live stream and immediately switched to texting, her fingers flying across the screen with the intensity of a court stenographer. "Busy day ahead?" I asked, refilling my coffee. "Oh, you know, the usual. Meeting with the Patterson account at 10, lunch with Tara and Chloe, then that new client consultation this afternoon." Tara and Chloe, Julia's best friends since college, a duo I'd nicknamed the Greek Chorus for their habit of validating every decision Julia made, no matter how questionable. Tara worked in real estate and possessed an almost supernatural ability to turn any conversation into gossip about someone's marriage, finances, or personal failings. Chloe was a therapist who used her professional training to psychoanalyze everyone except herself, usually while 3 drinks deep at our kitchen island. "Which new client?" I asked. "The one I mentioned last week. The startup guy with the food delivery app." She hadn't mentioned any startup guy, but I'd stopped keeping track of Julia's inconsistencies months ago. The mental spreadsheet was getting too depressing. My phone buzzed with a text from my business partner and best friend, Mikhail Petrov. We'd met in college computer science classes and bonded over our shared appreciation for sarcasm and craft beer. "BBQ at yours Saturday? Sarah's making her famous potato salad." I glanced at Julia, still absorbed in her phone. "Want to have Mikhail and Sarah over Saturday? Maybe fire up the grill?" Sure, that sounds nice." She wasn't listening, but I texted back confirmation anyway. At least I'd have one evening this week with people who didn't require Instagram documentation of every moment. The rest of the week followed our established pattern. Julia left early for mysterious meetings, returned late with shopping bags and stories that didn't quite add up, and spent her evenings glued to her phone while I helped Max with homework or caught up on work emails. Friday night, I was in my home office reviewing quarterly reports when I heard Julia's distinctive laugh echoing from the kitchen. Not her regular laugh, the one I'd been hearing for over a decade, but something newer, more musical. The kind of laugh women save for men they want to impress. I found her at the kitchen island, phone propped against the fruit bowl, clearly on a video call. "Oh, stop it! You're terrible!" she giggled, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. When she noticed me in the doorway, the laughter died instantly. "Listen, I should go. Talk to you later." The call ended abruptly. "Work call?" I asked. "Chloe, she was telling me about her disaster date last night. You know how she gets." Chloe had been married to the same man for 8 years. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect September weather that made me remember why we'd moved to the suburbs. Mikhail and Sarah showed up at 4 with a cooler full of beer and enough side dishes to feed a small army. Sarah Chen was everything Julia pretended to be on social media: genuinely warm, effortlessly funny, and completely uninterested in documenting every moment of her life online. She worked as a pediatric nurse and had the kind of practical wisdom that came from dealing with actual problems instead of manufactured drama. "How's the new business venture going?" Mikhail asked, handing me a beer as I preheated the grill. "Which one?" "Julia starts a new project every month." "The consulting thing, social media strategy for small businesses?" I paused, bottle halfway to my lips. "She hasn't mentioned that one." We were interrupted by Julia's grand entrance from the house, carrying a platter of vegetables arranged with Pinterest-worthy precision. She'd changed into white jeans and a flowing blue top that photographed beautifully against our deck's natural wood backdrop. "Sarah, you look amazing! I love what you've done with your hair!" Sarah touched her ponytail self-consciously. "Thanks. I literally just threw it up in the car." "Well, it's gorgeous. Very effortless chic." Julia immediately launched into hostess mode, positioning herself for optimal lighting while she arranged food on our outdoor table. Within minutes, she was live streaming again. Saturday vibes with our favorite people. Nothing better than good friends, good food, and good weather. Alex is manning the grill like the domestic god he is. I waved a spatula in acknowledgement, wondering when I'd been promoted to domestic god status. Usually, Julia's social media commentary relegated me to helpful husband or Max's dad. "Julia's really embraced the influencer lifestyle," Sarah murmured, settling into a chair beside me. "It pays the bills," I replied, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true anymore. As the evening progressed, I noticed Julia checking her phone with increasing frequency. Each notification brought that same secretive smile I'd been seeing for weeks. "Everything okay, babe?" I asked during a lull in conversation. "Perfect. Just some client stuff. You know how it is." Mikhail raised an eyebrow. "Client stuff on Saturday night? The beauty of social media. It never sleeps." but I caught the way she angled her phone away from the table, the quick swipe to close whatever app she'd been using. These weren't work notifications. After dinner, while Sarah helped Julia clear dishes, Mikhail and I found ourselves alone on the deck. "Can I ask you something?" he said, lowering his voice. "Shoot. Is everything cool with you and Julia? You seem, I don't know, distant tonight." I took a long pull from my beer, considering how much to share. Mikhail had been my closest friend for nearly 20 years, but admitting your marriage was falling apart felt like crossing a line you couldn't uncross. Just the usual stuff. Work stress, Max being a teenager, you know. Right. He didn't sound convinced. "Well, if you ever need to talk." "I know. Thanks." But as I watched Julia through the kitchen window, animated and laughing as she loaded our dishwasher while simultaneously texting someone, I realized talking wasn't going to fix what was broken between us. The real revelation came 2 weeks later, at what should have been a routine neighborhood gathering. The Hendersons threw their annual block party every October, transforming their backyard into an autumn wonderland complete with hay bales, pumpkin displays, and enough decorative corn stalks to feed a small farm. It was the kind of wholesome suburban gathering that Julia lived for. Dozens of photo opportunities and a captive audience for her latest lifestyle content. I was manning the makeshift bar, mixing drinks and making small talk with neighbors I saw maybe 3 times a year, when Julia materialized beside me in a sweater that probably cost more than most people's car payments. "Having fun, honey?" she asked, but her attention was already elsewhere, scanning the crowd like a social media predator hunting for content. "Living the dream," I replied, handing a gin and tonic to Mrs. Patterson from 2 houses down. That's when I saw him. Michael Foster stood near the Hendersons' fire pit, holding court with a group of wives who hung on his every word like he was dispensing life-changing wisdom instead of talking about his latest business venture. He looked exactly like the kind of man who'd never met a mirror he didn't love. Perfectly styled hair, expensive casual wear, and the kind of confident smile that suggested he'd never faced a real consequence in his life. Julia had gone completely still beside me. "Is that Michael Foster?" she asked, her voice pitched higher than usual. "You know him?" "We went to college together. I haven't seen him in years." But the way she was staring suggested she'd been thinking about him more recently than that. I watched as Julia excused herself from the bar and made her way across the yard with the kind of purposeful stride usually reserved for Black Friday sales. Within minutes, she'd inserted herself into Michael's circle, laughing at his jokes and touching his arm in that casual way that wasn't casual at all. "Interesting development," Mikhail appeared at my elbow, following my gaze. "What do you mean?" "Your wife, and the guy who looks like he stepped out of a cologne commercial. There's some serious history there." I continued mixing drinks, but kept one eye on Julia's performance across the yard. She was in full flirtation mode. Hair flipping, that musical laugh I'd been hearing through the kitchen door, the kind of animated gesturing she usually reserved for her most important social media content. "They're just catching up," I said. "Right. And I'm just observing human behavior patterns." Mikhail had a point. Julia was practically glowing under Michael's attention, transformed from the distracted wife I'd been living with into someone I barely recognized, someone who looked genuinely happy for the first time in months. The evening continued with Julia dividing her time between playing the perfect hostess wife and gravitating toward Michael's orbit, like a moth drawn to an expensive flame. By the time we walked home, she was practically floating. "That was so much fun," she gushed, linking her arm through mine in a display of affection I hadn't experienced in weeks. "Did you have a good time?" "Sure. You seem to enjoy catching up with your college friend." "Michael? Oh my God, yes. I can't believe how successful he's become. Did you know he sold his first company for 8 figures? 8 figures, Alex. And now he's launching this incredible new venture that's going to revolutionize sustainable packaging." She continued chattering about Michael's accomplishments as we walked up our driveway, but I was processing something else entirely. The way she'd said his name, Michael, with a kind of reverence I hadn't heard her use in years. Certainly not when she talked about me. That night, Julia was more affectionate than she'd been in months. She curled up against me in bed, traced patterns on my chest, and initiated the kind of intimacy that had become increasingly rare in our marriage. But even as she moved against me in the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was thinking about someone else. The next few days confirmed my suspicions. Julia's phone activity increased exponentially, accompanied by secretive smiles and sudden trips to the bathroom during dinner. She started paying more attention to her appearance, spending longer in front of her closet each morning, and asking my opinion about outfits for the first time in years. "Do you think this dress is too much for a coffee meeting?" she asked Thursday morning, modeling a black wrap dress that showed off her figure in ways her usual yoga pants didn't. "Depends on the coffee meeting. Just a potential client thing. Nothing major." But she was wearing heels. Julia never wore heels to actual work meetings. That evening, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. I was going to test my wife's loyalty, and I was going to use my best friend to do it. "I need a favor," I told Mikhail over lunch Friday afternoon. "A weird one." "I'm listening." We were sitting in our usual spot at Murphy's Pub, a dive bar that served excellent burgers and minded its own business. The kind of place where you could have conversations without worrying about being overheard by neighbors or documented on social media. "I think Julia might be having an affair." Mikhail set down his beer. "Shit, are you sure?" "No, that's why I need the favor." I outlined my plan, watching my friend's expression shift from concern to disbelief to reluctant understanding. It was simple, really. Mikhail would flirt with Julia at the next social gathering. Nothing serious, just enough to gauge her receptiveness to male attention from someone who wasn't her husband. "This feels like a bad idea," he said. "Probably, but I need to know where I stand. And if she flirts back, then I'll have my answer." The opportunity came sooner than expected. Tara invited us to her housewarming party the following Saturday, a gathering that would include most of our social circle and provide the perfect testing ground. Julia spent an hour getting ready, changing outfits 3 times before settling on jeans that looked painted on, and a silk blouse that somehow managed to be both elegant and suggestive. She looked stunning, and for a moment I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. "You look beautiful," I told her, as we walked up Tara's front steps. "Thank you." She squeezed my hand, and I felt a flicker of hope that maybe I was wrong about everything. The hope lasted exactly 43 minutes. I was in Tara's kitchen, refilling drinks and making small talk about the housing market, when I spotted Julia and Mikhail on the back patio. He was leaning against the railing, gesturing as he told some story, and she was giving him her complete attention, the kind of focused interest she used to reserve for me. As I watched, she laughed at something he said and placed her hand on his forearm. The touch lingered longer than necessary, her thumb brushing against his skin in a gesture that was unmistakably flirtatious. My chest tightened. Mikhail glanced toward the kitchen and caught my eye through the window. The expression on his face was pure apology, but he continued the conversation, playing his part in our twisted little experiment. Over the next hour, I watched my wife fail my loyalty test in spectacular fashion. She found excuses to be near Mikhail, laughed at his jokes with genuine delight, and touched him with increasing frequency. At one point, she actually fed him a piece of cheese from the appetizer tray, an intimate gesture that made my stomach turn. "Your wife seems to be having a good time," Tara commented, appearing beside me with a knowing smile. "She's always been social. Mikhail's quite charming. Sarah's a lucky woman." The implication hung in the air between us. Tara had noticed what everyone else at the party was probably seeing. My wife openly flirting with another man while I stood 20 feet away. When we finally left that night, Julia was practically vibrating with excitement. That was such a fun party. Tara really outdid herself with the decorations. And wasn't Mikhail hilarious? I'd forgotten how funny he could be. When did you forget? You see him all the time. I mean, I never really paid attention before, but tonight he seemed different. More, I don't know, interesting? She continued analyzing Mikhail's newfound appeal as we drove home, oblivious to the fact that she was twisting the knife with every word. But the real revelation came 3 days later. I was working late in my home office when I heard Julia's phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. She was upstairs in the shower, and the sound was driving me crazy, a constant stream of notifications that suggested someone was having an urgent conversation. I told myself I was just going to silence the phone, that I wasn't actually planning to invade her privacy. The screen lit up as I approached, displaying a series of text messages from a contact labeled M. My heart stopped. Can't stop thinking about Saturday night. When can I see you again? Julia, you're incredible. I haven't felt this way in years. I stared at the messages, my hands shaking slightly as the implications sank in. The heart emoji, the intimate tone, the fact that she'd saved his contact information with obvious care. But it was the final message that destroyed me completely. I know you're married, but what we have is special. Don't let Alex hold you back from the life you deserve. I set the phone down carefully and walked back to my office, closing the door with deliberate calm. Then I sat in my chair and stared at my computer screen, processing the complete collapse of my marriage. Julia wasn't just having an affair. She was having an affair with someone who knew me, someone who'd been in my home, someone who felt comfortable discussing my marriage like it was an obstacle to be overcome. And the most crushing part? It wasn't even Mikhail. The M heart in her phone wasn't my best friend. It was Michael Foster, the cologne commercial come to life who'd swept back into Julia's world and convinced her that she deserved better than the life we'd built together. My loyalty test had failed, but not in the way I'd expected. As I heard Julia's footsteps on the stairs, humming some song I didn't recognize, I realized that everything I'd believed about my marriage, my wife, and my future was about to change. The only question now was what I was going to do about it. 3 weeks passed before I had enough evidence to confront Julia. 3 weeks of watching my wife transform into someone I barely recognized. She started working out again, bought new clothes, and developed a sudden interest in girls' nights that seemed to happen with suspicious frequency. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in November. I was helping Max with his college application essays when Julia breezed through the front door, cheeks flushed and eyes bright with the kind of happiness I hadn't inspired in months. Sorry I'm late. Chloe and I lost track of time at that new wine bar downtown. She kissed my cheek, a perfunctory gesture that smelled like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. How's Chloe doing? I asked casually. Oh, you know, same old drama with her husband. I keep telling her she needs to think about what she really wants from life. Sounds like good advice. Julia disappeared upstairs to shower, leaving behind a trail of unfamiliar scent and the kind of nervous energy that comes from living a double life. I pulled out my phone and texted Chloe directly. Hope you had fun at the wine bar tonight. Her response came within minutes. What wine bar? I'm in bed with the flu. Have been all week. There it was. Confirmation of what I'd already known but hadn't wanted to accept. Julia wasn't just having an affair, she was lying about it with increasing boldness, apparently confident that I was too oblivious or too weak to call her out. She was wrong on both counts. I spent the weekend planning my approach, weighing options and considering consequences. I could hire a private investigator, gather irrefutable evidence, and file for divorce. I could confront her privately and demand she end the affair. Or I could do something that would expose her betrayal in the most devastating way possible. The decision was made for me Monday evening. Max was at basketball practice, and I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Julia's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and immediately stepped onto the back patio to take the call, sliding the door closed behind her. But she'd forgotten that our kitchen window was open. "I miss you too," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the crisp November air. "I wish I could see you tonight, but Alex is being clingy lately. I think he suspects something." I moved closer to the window, my hands gripping the granite countertop. "No, he hasn't said anything directly, but he's been asking more questions about where I go, who I'm with. It's getting harder to make excuses." A pause as she listened to Michael's response. "I know, baby. I want that too. But I need to be careful about how I handle this. Max is only 15 and Alex would make things difficult if he knew." Another pause. "Of course I'm going to leave him, but I need to do it right. Maybe after the holidays? Give Max time to adjust to the idea?" My vision blurred with rage. She was planning to leave me, had been discussing it with her lover like I was some obstacle to be managed rather than the man she'd promised to love and honor. "Michael, you have to understand. Alex isn't like other men. He's smart and he's stubborn. And if he finds out about us before I'm ready to tell him, he'll make our lives hell." That was the moment I decided to prove her right. I stepped onto the patio so quietly that Julia didn't notice me until I was standing directly behind her. "Tell Michael I said hello," I said calmly. She spun around, phone clutched to her chest, face white with shock. "Alex, I didn't hear you come out." "I gathered that. Please don't let me interrupt. You were discussing your post-holiday plans?" For a moment, she looked like she might try to lie her way out of it. I could see her mind racing, searching for an explanation that would make this conversation about something innocent. Then her expression hardened into something I'd never seen before, defiant, almost relieved. "How long have you been listening?" "Long enough. Is Michael still on the line? I'd love to chat with him." She ended the call without another word. "Julia, we need to talk." "Yes, we do." We stood there on our back patio, surrounded by the carefully maintained landscaping that had provided the backdrop for countless Instagram photos, and faced the end of our marriage. "How long?" I asked. "Since the block party. 6 weeks. That's all it took for you to decide our 12-year marriage wasn't worth fighting for?" "It's not about Michael," she said, but the lie sounded hollow even to her. "Alex, we've been unhappy for months. You know that. I know you've been unhappy. I've been confused about why my wife suddenly found everything about our life inadequate. Because it is inadequate." The words exploded out of her with surprising vehemence. "Do you know what it's like to be married to someone who's completely satisfied with mediocrity? Someone who thinks a successful Saturday night is helping our son with homework and watching Netflix? I thought that was called being a family. Well, I want more than that. I want someone who challenges me, who has ambitions beyond maintaining the status quo, someone who sees potential in me beyond being a suburban housewife." "Like Michael." "Yes, like Michael. He's building something amazing, Alex. He's going to change entire industries. And he sees me as a partner, not just someone to manage his social calendar and raise his children." The casual cruelty of that last sentence hit me like a physical blow. Max wasn't even Michael's child, but Julia was already mentally replacing me in every aspect of her life. "So what's your plan? Run away with your college boyfriend and leave Max to figure out why his mother abandoned him?" "I'm not abandoning anyone. Michael and I are going to build a life together, and Max will be part of that. He'll have opportunities with us that he'd never have here." "Opportunities like what? A front row seat to his mother's midlife crisis?" Her hand cracked across my face before I saw it coming, the sound echoing across our manicured backyard like a gunshot. "Don't you dare judge me," she hissed. "You have no idea what it's like to feel trapped in a life that's slowly suffocating you." I touched my cheek, tasting blood where her wedding ring had split my lip. "You're right," I said quietly. "I don't know what that feels like. because I chose to find happiness in the life we built together instead of fantasizing about something else. That's the difference between us, Alex. You chose to settle. I chose to fight for what I want. And what you want is Michael Foster. What I want is a partner who sees my potential instead of taking me for granted. What I want is someone who gets excited about the future instead of just accepting whatever happens. What I want is a man who makes me feel alive. Each word was carefully chosen to inflict maximum damage, and they found their target with surgical precision. When? I asked. When what? When are you leaving? She hesitated, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the woman I'd married. Uncertain, vulnerable, maybe even regretful. I don't know. After Christmas, maybe. I need to figure out how to tell Max, how to handle the logistics. The logistics of destroying our family. The logistics of starting over. We stood there in the gathering darkness, two people who'd once promised to love each other through everything, now facing each other like adversaries. I want you to end it, I said finally. What? End it with Michael, now, tonight. Call him back and tell him it's over. She stared at me like I'd suggested she cut off her own arm. I can't do that. You mean you won't? Alex, you're not listening to me. I'm in love with him. This isn't some fling or midlife crisis. This is real. Your marriage is real. Your son is real. The life we've built together is real. The life we built together is a beautiful lie, and you know it. We've been going through the motions for years, pretending everything is fine while we slowly drift apart. So we fix it. We go to counseling. We work on our problems. We remember why we fell in love in the first place. I don't want to fix it. The words came out as a shout, loud enough that our neighbors probably heard every syllable. I want out, Alex. I want to be with someone who makes me feel like the best version of myself instead of just a supporting character in his comfortable little life. And if I refuse to give you a divorce? Then I'll take Max and leave anyway. Michael has lawyers, Alex. Good ones. The threat hung between us like a blade. She was prepared to fight dirty, to use our son as leverage to get what she wanted. That's when I realized that the woman I'd married, the one who'd cried during our wedding vows and promised to love me through everything, was gone. In her place stood someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of destroying everything we'd built without a second thought. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of my house, tonight. Alex, be reasonable. We need to discuss how to handle this properly, how to tell Max. We're not discussing anything. You made your choice. Now live with it. You can't just kick me out. This is my house too. Actually, it's my house. The deed is in my name, remember? You insisted on that when we bought it for tax reasons. I watched the realization dawn on her face. In her rush to optimize our financial situation, she'd given me the power to remove her from the equation entirely. Alex, please, let's talk about this like adults. Adults don't have affairs, Julia. Adults don't plan to abandon their families for their college boyfriends. Adults don't threaten to take children away from their fathers when they don't get their way. I never said I was taking Max away from you. You just threatened to take him and leave if I didn't give you a divorce. That's not what I meant. But we both knew it was exactly what she'd meant. Pack a bag, I said. You can stay with Tara or Chloe or Michael. I don't care which. But you're not sleeping in my house tonight. This is insane. You can't just, I can and I am. You want to start your new life? Congratulations. It starts now. She stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for some sign that I was bluffing. When she found none, something shifted in her expression. Surprise giving way to anger, anger giving way to cold calculation. Fine, she said. But this isn't over, Alex. I'm going to fight for what's mine. Good luck with that. She turned and walked toward the house, her heels clicking against the patio stones with sharp staccato beats that sounded like gunshots in the quiet evening air. 20 minutes later, I watched from the living room window as Julia loaded 2 suitcases into her BMW and backed out of our driveway without looking back. I stood there until her tail lights disappeared around the corner, then walked upstairs to tell my son that his mother had decided to pursue other opportunities. It was going to be a long night. But as I climbed the stairs to face the hardest conversation of my parenting career, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Clarity. Julia had made her choice. Now it was time to make mine, and I was going to make sure she regretted every single decision that had brought us to this moment. The next morning brought the kind of crystalline November sunshine that made everything look deceptively peaceful. I was making coffee and trying to figure out how to explain to Max why his mother's car wasn't in the driveway when my phone exploded with notifications. Julia had spent the night crafting her narrative on social media. "Going through a difficult time right now," read her Facebook post, accompanied by a carefully curated photo of her looking vulnerable yet beautiful. "Sometimes life takes unexpected turns, and we have to find the courage to follow our hearts, even when it's scary. Thank you to everyone who's reached out with love and support. Your messages mean everything to me. Hashtag new beginnings, hashtag courage, hashtag authentic life." The comments section was already filling up with concerned friends and neighbors offering support, asking what had happened, speculating about our marriage. Julia had positioned herself as the victim of some unnamed tragedy, leaving everyone to assume I was the villain in whatever drama had unfolded. My phone rang. "Mikhail, what the hell is going on? Sarah just showed me Julia's Facebook post. She's having an affair. I confronted her last night. She's gone." "Jesus, I'm sorry, man. Are you okay?" "I'm getting there. Do you need anything? Want me to come over?" "Actually, yes. I need you to help me with something." An hour later, Mikhail was sitting at my kitchen island, listening to my plan with the kind of expression usually reserved for people contemplating whether to call the police or a psychiatrist. "You want to do what now?" "Expose her. Publicly. Let everyone see who she really is, instead of the victim narrative she's spinning online." "Alex, I get that you're angry." "I'm not angry. I'm done. There's a difference." I showed him the screenshots I'd taken of Julia's text messages with Michael, the evidence of her lies about where she'd been spending her time, the documentation of her systematic deception over the past 6 weeks. "She's been planning this for weeks, Mikhail. Planning to leave me, take Max, and run off with her college boyfriend, all while pretending to be the perfect wife on social media and accepting sympathy from friends who think she's going through some kind of crisis. Okay. But revenge posting on Facebook isn't going to fix your marriage. My marriage is over. She made that clear last night. But I'm not going to let her rewrite history to make me the bad guy." Mikhail studied the evidence spread across my counter, printed emails, text message screenshots, a timeline of Julia's deceptions that read like a masterclass in marital betrayal. "This is pretty damning stuff," he admitted. "She's been lying to everyone, including herself. Time for some truth." "And you want me to help you how exactly?" "I need witnesses. People who can corroborate what really happened. Starting with you. You saw her flirting with you at Tara's party. You know she was actively looking for an exit from our marriage." That feels like a pretty big leap from flirtation to affair. I showed him the text message thread between Julia and Michael that had started the night of Tara's party. "She wasn't flirting with you because she was interested in you," I explained. "She was testing her ability to attract male attention, practicing for the main event." Mikhail read through the messages, his expression growing darker with each exchange. "Shit, Alex, this is brutal. Now imagine living with someone who's been planning your replacement while pretending to love you." "Okay, I'm in. What do you need me to do?" The plan was simple but effective. Instead of engaging in a social media war or trying to defend myself against Julia's carefully crafted victim narrative, I was going to let the truth speak for itself. I spent the afternoon creating a detailed timeline of Julia's affair, complete with evidence and documentation. Not for social media, that would make me look petty and vindictive. Instead, I was going to share it with the people who mattered, our closest friends, Max's teachers and coaches, Julia's family, and anyone else who might be influenced by her version of events. The first test came that evening when Tara called. "Alex, I just wanted to check on you. Julia's post was so cryptic, and I know you two have been going through a rough patch." "What did she tell you?" "Just that you've been growing apart, and she needs some space to figure out what she wants. She's staying in my guest room for a few days while you both cool down." Interesting. Julia had positioned this as a temporary separation rather than the permanent exit she'd actually planned. "Tara, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond." I laid out the facts calmly and methodically, the affair, the lies, the threats to take Max away from me. I didn't editorialize or express anger. I just presented the evidence and let her draw her own conclusions. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute. "Alex, are you sure about this? I mean, Julia seems so committed to your family. Check her phone if you don't believe me. Look at her text messages with Michael Foster. Ask her directly about where she was last Thursday night when she told me she was with Chloe." Another long pause. I need to process this. "I understand. But Tara, when she tries to convince you that I'm the problem in our marriage, remember that she's been lying to everyone, including you, for weeks." The call ended with polite but strained goodbyes, and I knew I'd planted the first seed of doubt in Julia's support network. The second call came from Chloe an hour later. "Alex, what did you say to Tara? She's asking Julia all kinds of uncomfortable questions." I told her the truth. Your version of the truth. The documented, evidence-supported version of the truth. Would you like to see it? "That's not necessary. I think you're both hurt and angry, and you're lashing out." "Chloe, Julia told me she was with you last Thursday night, having drinks at that new wine bar downtown. But you were homesick with the flu, remember? You even posted about it on Instagram." The silence told me everything I needed to know. "She's been using you as an alibi," I continued, "using your friendship to cover up her affair. How does that make you feel?" "I think this conversation is getting out of hand. I think you're realizing that your best friend has been manipulating you just like she's been manipulating me." The call ended abruptly, but I knew the damage was done. Julia's closest allies were starting to question her version of events, and once doubt crept in, the truth would follow. By Friday morning, the cracks in Julia's narrative were starting to show. Max came downstairs looking confused and upset. "Dad, kids at school are saying weird stuff about you and Mom. Tyler's mom asked him if we were getting divorced." I sat him down at the kitchen table and gave him the age-appropriate version of recent events. Yes, his mother and I were having serious problems. No, it wasn't his fault. Yes, she was staying somewhere else for now. No, I didn't know what was going to happen long-term. "Is she coming back?" he asked. "I don't know, buddy. That's up to her." "Do you want her to come back?" The question caught me off guard. 2 weeks ago, the answer would have been an automatic yes. Now, after seeing how easily she'd been willing to destroy our family for her college boyfriend, I wasn't sure. "I want what's best for you," I said finally. "And right now, I'm not sure what that is." Max nodded like this made perfect sense, and I was reminded that teenagers are often more resilient and perceptive than adults give them credit for. "Can I ask you something, Dad?" "Anything." "Were you and Mom happy? I mean, before all this happened?" I considered lying, giving him some comforting fiction about how sometimes adults just grow apart. But Max deserved better than that. "I thought we were, but your mom was unhappy, and instead of talking to me about it, she decided to look for happiness somewhere else." "With that guy from the block party? How did you—" "I'm not blind, Dad," Ben said, staring down into his soda like it might offer a kinder explanation than the one we both already had. "She was all weird and giggly after that party, and she kept checking her phone and smiling. Plus, she started wearing perfume to go grocery shopping." Smart kid. Too smart, maybe. Smart enough to notice the tiny behavioral tells adults think children miss. Smart enough to connect patterns while still being young enough to feel betrayed by the idea that grown-ups can lie so casually. I didn't answer right away. I just watched him for a moment, my son sitting across from me with his shoulders slightly hunched, trying to look tough and indifferent while his whole world shifted under his feet. He looked older than he had a week ago. That's what betrayal does to kids. It ages them in minutes. Yeah, I said finally. With Michael. Ben's mouth tightened. That sucks. Yeah, I said quietly. It does. We sat there for a moment, father and son, letting the truth settle into the space between us. The kitchen was too quiet. Even the refrigerator hum sounded loud, like it was annoyed we weren't pretending anymore. Outside, a lawnmower droned somewhere down the street, the normal noise of other people living normal lives, and I hated that normality for a second because it felt unfair. Our house was breaking apart, and the neighborhood was still trimming hedges. Dad? Ben asked. Yeah? I'm glad you didn't just pretend everything was fine. His words hit me harder than anything Julia had said since she left, not because they were dramatic, but because they were simple. Kids don't need speeches. They need reality they can trust. And even if the truth hurts, it hurts less than being forced to participate in a lie. I reached across the table and put my hand over his for a brief second, not squeezing, not making it a big moment, just grounding us. Me too, I said. I won't pretend. That afternoon, Julia called for the first time since leaving. No text first, no softening preamble. Just a call, as if she still believed she could summon me into whatever shape she needed. We need to talk, she said without preamble. I'm listening, I replied, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt. Not over the phone, she said. Can you meet me somewhere? Why? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She didn't want a record. She didn't want words that could be replayed or forwarded. She wanted a conversation she could later summarize in whatever way benefited her. Because Tara and Chloe are asking questions I can't answer, Julia snapped, frustration leaking through the control, and I need to know what you told them. I told them the truth, I said. Your version of the truth. The only version that matters, I replied, and my jaw tightened as I said it. The one supported by evidence. There was a short, sharp exhale on the line, the sound of someone trying to stay calm while feeling their grip slip. Julia had always been good at spinning, good at reframing, good at turning messy reality into a narrative where she was still the reasonable one. Evidence wasn't her language. She preferred feelings. She preferred implication. She preferred anything that couldn't be pinned down. Alex, she said, and her voice shifted into that familiar tone she used when she wanted to sound mature and disappointed at the same time. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. But either way, we're going to have a conversation about how to handle this situation like adults. Adults don't have affairs, Julia, I said, and my voice stayed even. I wasn't going to shout. Shouting would give her what she wanted, a reason to label me unstable. Adults also don't air their dirty laundry to mutual friends when their marriages fall apart, she shot back. Then maybe you shouldn't have created any dirty laundry, I replied, and the line went quiet, not because she didn't have an answer, but because she didn't have an answer that didn't admit guilt. The silence stretched between us, filled with years of accumulated resentment and recent betrayal. I could feel her trying to calculate a new angle, trying to decide which lever would move me. Guilt, fear, the kids, reputation. She'd always been good at choosing the lever. Murphy's Pub, she said finally. 6 o'clock. I'll be there, I said. And Alex? Her tone sharpened. Come alone. The line went dead, and for a moment, I just stood there with my phone in my hand, staring at the blank screen like it might explain why that last demand had irritated me so much. Come alone. Like she still had the authority to set conditions, like this was still her stage. I walked into the living room and found Ben sprawled on the couch, half watching something on TV while his mind was clearly elsewhere. He looked up when I entered. "She called," I said. Ben muted the TV. "What did she want?" "To talk," I replied. "Murphy's, 6. Ben's eyes narrowed. "She said anything else?" "She told me to come alone," I said, and Ben immediately scoffed, a sound too adult for his age. "Of course she did." I sat down across from him and leaned forward slightly. "I'm going," I said, "but I need you to do something for me." Ben's posture straightened, alert. "What?" "Keep your phone on," I said. "If anything feels weird, you call Sam. He's on standby. I'm not expecting trouble, but I'm done underestimating how desperate people can get when their story starts collapsing." Ben nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, then hesitated. "Dad?" "Yeah." "Are you scared?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to be the kind of father who never looks uncertain. But uncertainty is part of truth, and I'd promised him truth. "I'm cautious," I said. "There's a difference." Ben nodded like he accepted that. Then he surprised me by saying, "She's still going to try to make you the bad guy." "I know," I replied, and the calmness in my voice wasn't bravado. It was preparation. "But she can only do that if I let her define the terms." I stood up and went to my bedroom to get ready, and as I pulled a clean shirt from the closet, I felt something I hadn't felt since the night everything exploded. Anticipation. Not excitement, not revenge. Anticipation like a man walking into a meeting where he finally has the documents and the other side still thinks it's a debate. Julia wanted a conversation about handling it like adults. She wanted to choreograph it, soften it, contain it inside the walls of a pub where she could cry quietly and look dignified and walk away claiming we'd agreed to be respectful. Perfect. Because adults don't avoid consequences. Adults don't hide behind vague language. Adults don't demand privacy to keep their lies intact. Adults deal with facts, even when facts are humiliating. I checked my wallet, my keys, my phone. I made sure my car's dash camera was working, not because I was paranoid, but because I'd learned the difference between paranoia and preparation. I typed a quick message to Sam. "Meeting Julia at Murphy's 6. Be available." Then I put my phone in my pocket and took a breath. Julia still thought she could control the narrative. She still believed she could manipulate me into accepting her version of events, into cushioning the fall so she wouldn't have to feel the full impact of what she'd done. She was about to learn otherwise. By the time I stepped out the front door, the sun was already lowering, casting long shadows across the driveway. The air felt crisp, charged, like the world itself was waiting for something to break. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I wasn't dreading the next conversation. I was ready for it. Murphy's pub at 6 o'clock on a Friday evening was exactly the wrong place for a private conversation, which was exactly why I'd agreed to meet Julia there. The bar was packed with happy hour crowds, local business types unwinding after a long week, and enough ambient noise to provide cover for what I suspected was going to be a very revealing discussion. Julia was already waiting in a corner booth when I arrived, looking perfectly composed in a black sweater and jeans that probably cost more than most people's rent. She'd chosen her seat strategically, back to the wall, clear view of the entrance, positioned to make a dramatic exit if necessary. "Thank you for coming," she said, as I slid into the booth across from her. "Wouldn't miss it." She had a glass of white wine in front of her, barely touched, and her phone face down on the table, a sure sign she was expecting this conversation to require her full attention. "We need to establish some ground rules," she began. "I'm listening. First, whatever problems we're having stay between us. No more involving our friends in our personal business." "You mean no more telling people the truth about your affair?" "I mean no more trying to turn people against me with your selective version of events." I signaled the bartender for a beer and settled back in my seat. "What's your version of events, Julia?" "That we've been having marital problems for months. We're trying to work things out, and we'd appreciate privacy and support from our friends while we figure things out. Interesting. And where does Michael fit into this narrative? Michael is a friend who's been supportive during a difficult time. A friend you've been sleeping with. A friend who understands what I'm going through. What you're going through. That's fascinating phrasing. Like you're the victim of some terrible circumstance instead of the architect of our marriage's destruction. Her composure cracked slightly. Alex, I'm trying to handle this maturely. No, you're trying to control the narrative. There's a difference. My beer arrived, and I took a long sip while Julia regrouped. Fine, she said. You want to do this the hard way? Let's talk about your role in the breakdown of our marriage. I'm all ears. You've been emotionally absent for years. You go through the motions of being a husband and father, but you're not really present. You're satisfied with mediocrity, content to just coast through life without any real ambition or passion. Anything else? You take me for granted. When was the last time you planned a surprise for me? When was the last time you looked at me like I was the most important person in your world instead of just another item on your to-do list? I considered her accusations while she continued her litany of my failings as a husband. Some of it was probably true. I had gotten comfortable in our routine, had stopped making the grand romantic gestures that had characterized our early relationship. Are you finished? I asked when she paused. For now? Good, because I have some questions. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo album I'd created specifically for this conversation. Let's start with Thursday, October 15th. You told me you were having drinks with Chloe at the new wine bar downtown. But Chloe was home sick with the flu, and these photos show you having dinner with Michael at Chez Laurent. I slid the phone across the table. Julia's face went white as she recognized the images. Screenshots from the restaurant's social media page that clearly showed her and Michael at an intimate table for two. How did you... The restaurant posts photos of their daily specials on Instagram. You're visible in the background of 3 different shots. Amazing what you can find when you actually look. I retrieved my phone and scrolled to the next set of evidence. October 22nd. You said you were working late on the Patterson account. But the Patterson account was completed the week before. I checked with Mrs. Patterson directly. Meanwhile, Michael posted a photo of his dinner at that new steakhouse across town. Guess whose reflection is visible in the window behind him? Julia's hands were shaking now, but she tried to maintain her composure. Alex, I can explain. October 28th. Girls' night with Tara and Chloe, remember? Except Tara was at her mother-in-law's birthday party in Hartford, and Chloe was on a date with her husband. I have the social media posts to prove it. Care to guess where you actually were? Stop. November 3rd. Another late work meeting that didn't exist. November 7th. Shopping with your sister who was actually in Florida. November 12th. Stop! The word came out loud enough to turn heads at nearby tables. Julia looked around nervously, then leaned forward and lowered her voice. Okay, you've made your point. I lied about where I was, but that doesn't change the fundamental problems in our marriage. You're right. It doesn't change them. It reveals them. What do you mean? The fundamental problem in our marriage, Julia, is that you're a liar. You're selfish, manipulative, and completely incapable of taking responsibility for your own actions. That's not... You've been having an affair for 6 weeks, lying to our son, lying to our friends, lying to me, and somehow you've convinced yourself that it's justified because I don't plan enough surprises. It's not about the surprises. Then what is it about? Really? She stared at me across the table, and for a moment I saw something that might have been genuine emotion flicker across her features. It's about feeling alive again, she said quietly. It's about being with someone who sees me as more than just a wife and mother. Someone who gets excited about possibilities instead of just accepting whatever happens. Someone with more money than me. It's not about money. Michael sold his company for 8 figures. That's what you told me the night of the block party. You were practically glowing when you said it. That's not why I'm attracted to him. Then why? Because he makes me feel like the person I used to be before I got trapped in this suburban nightmare of carpools and grocery shopping and pretending to be happy with a life that's slowly killing me inside. There it was. The truth, finally. So our entire marriage has been a nightmare for you? Not the entire marriage, but the last few years. Alex, don't you ever want more than this? Don't you ever dream about what your life could be like if you weren't tied down by responsibilities and obligations and the endless routine of middle-class respectability? No, I said simply. I don't, because I chose this life. I chose you. I chose Max. I chose to build something meaningful instead of chasing fantasies about what might be better somewhere else. And that's the difference between us. Yes, it is. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 12 years of marriage settling between us like a funeral shroud. So what happens now? She asked. Now you get what you wanted. Your freedom. Alex, I'm filing for divorce on Monday. I'm asking for primary custody of Max, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly why our marriage ended. You can't do that. It will destroy me. You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy our family. I never meant for things to go this far, but they did go this far, and now you have to live with the consequences. Julia's composure finally shattered completely. Tears streamed down her face as she realized that her carefully constructed plan was falling apart. Please, Alex, we can work this out. I'll end things with Michael. We can go to counseling. We can start over. No, we can't. Why not? Because I don't love you anymore. The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. What? I don't love you anymore, Julia. I don't even like you. You've shown me who you really are, and that person is not someone I want to be married to. You don't mean that. I absolutely mean that. You're selfish, dishonest, and cruel. You were willing to destroy our son's family for your college boyfriend. You threatened to take Max away from me when I didn't immediately agree to give you everything you wanted. You've lied to everyone who cares about you, including yourself. Alex, please. The woman I married wouldn't have done any of those things, which means either you've changed into someone I don't recognize, or you were always this person and I was too stupid to see it. I stood up and dropped a 20 on the table. Either way, I'm done. Where are you going? Home. To my son. To start building a life without you in it. Alex, wait. But I was already walking away, leaving Julia crying alone in a crowded bar, finally experiencing the consequences of her choices. As I drove home through the November darkness, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. My marriage was over, but my life was just beginning. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I was looking forward to what came next. When I got home, Max was in the living room doing homework. How did it go? He asked, without looking up from his textbook. It went exactly how it needed to go. So it's really over? Yeah, buddy, it's really over. He nodded and went back to his math problems, and I realized that my son was going to be just fine. We both were. Julia had gotten exactly what she wanted, her freedom to pursue the life she thought she deserved, and I had gotten something even better. The truth about who she really was and the chance to build something better without her. As I settled into my chair and opened my laptop to begin researching divorce attorneys, I couldn't help but smile. Julia had been right about one thing. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns, and you have to find the courage to follow your heart, even when it's scary. I was about to show her exactly what that looked like.